Alexander Rhys stood before the towering glass walls of his penthouse office, 60 stories above a city he once believed he controlled like a living machine. The skyline glimmered beneath him, a mosaic of wealth, ambition, and power that he had spent 20 relentless years conquering. His reflection stared back, a man carved from discipline, dressed in a charcoal suit that still carried the authority he had earned long before the world learned to bow at his name. Behind him, life inside Rhys Global Systems pulsed like a giant organism. Assistants darted past with tablets. Legal teams whispered over acquisitions. Investors sat in glass-walled rooms, waiting for the announcement that would catapult Alexander into the echelon of myth. Tomorrow, he would launch Vanguard, an adaptive AI algorithm predicted to revolutionize predictive markets. He would become untouchable. Immortal in business history. Or so he thought. A soft knock disrupted his thoughts. "Mr. Rhys," said Jonah Patel, his IT director, stepping in with a tablet pressed against his chest like a shield. The man's eyes darted nervously behind thin glasses. "I need a moment. It's important." Alexander didn't turn. "Make it quick, Jonah. I'm finalizing tomorrow's merger." "It's the Vanguard system," Jonah said, voice barely above a whisper. "We detected unusual patterns in the back end, data loops that shouldn't exist." Alexander finally faced him. "Loops? Or glitches?" "We're not sure yet, sir. It could be a breach." "Impossible. Our encryption is military grade." Jonah swallowed. "Sir, encryption means nothing if the breach originated internally." Alexander's jaw tightened. "Run a full diagnostic. I want results before morning." "Yes, sir." Jonah hurried out, leaving Alexander alone with the distant hum of the city and a shard of unease he couldn't shake. He didn't know it yet, but that shard was the crack in his empire. The building was nearly empty when the first alert flashed across his computer screen at 11:39 p.m. A brilliant red notification pulsed like a heartbeat. "Critical error, system compromised." Alexander frowned and tapped the keyboard. The screen flickered violently, then exploded into chaos, cascading error messages, corrupted files, embedded warnings he'd never authorized. His phone rang immediately. "Mr. Rhys, it's bad." Jonah's voice cracked. "The servers are failing. All of them. Someone activated a dormant program embedded months ago." "Sir, this wasn't an attack, it was a setup." Alexander grabbed his coat and sprinted toward the elevator. "Shut it down. We can't. Every firewall we close, another one opens." The elevator descended like a falling stone. When the doors parted, chaos swallowed him whole. Engineers crowded around terminals, shouting instructions. Smoke drifted from one of the server racks. Alarms blared. The air smelled like burning plastic and fear. Jonah met him with wide, terrified eyes. "Someone created a backdoor 6 months ago. It's been waiting. And now it's deleting, rewriting, and transmitting data." "To where?" "We don't know. But everything is gone. Every confidential file. Every prototype. Vanguard is." He hesitated. "Vanguard is destroyed." Alexander felt the ground tilt beneath him. Destroyed. His empire, his legacy, his life's work, evaporating in seconds. At dawn, news vans filled the streets. Investors demanded answers. The board demanded blood. His blood. By noon, Alexander had lost 40% of his net worth. By evening, he'd lost his company. By midnight, he'd lost everything else: access, assets, reputation, even the respect of the employees who once worshipped him. The final blow came in a cold, merciless sentence from the chairman of his board. "Mr. Rhys, we require your resignation effective immediately." Security escorted him through the lobby like a criminal. The man who had built an empire walked out with nothing but a hollowed chest and a truth too painful to face. Someone close to him had orchestrated his downfall. And Alexander Rhys had no idea who, or why. But in the shadows of that collapse, a girl he'd never noticed was about to walk into his life. And change it forever. Alexander Rhys spent the night wandering through the ruins of his penthouse, a magnificent palace of glass and marble that now felt like a tomb. His empire had collapsed in less than 20 hours. His accounts were frozen. His assets seized for investigation. His board had exiled him without hesitation. And the man he used to see in the mirror, sharp, invincible, untouchable, had vanished with the sunrise. His penthouse was silent except for the faint hum of the refrigerator and the distant drone of the city. He sat in the dim living room, surrounded by papers, broken trust, and the suffocating weight of humiliation. His laptop sat open on the coffee table, its once powerful system little more than a smoking corpse of corrupted files. He was alone. Or so he thought. At exactly 6:14 a.m., the front door clicked open. "Mr. Rhys," a soft voice called out. Alexander frowned. He'd forgotten about the morning cleaning crew. Elaine Carter, his longtime housekeeper, stepped inside wearing her simple uniform. She was in her late 40s, warm-eyed, graceful, and so consistent that Alexander had rarely paid attention to anything beyond her reliability. Today, though, she paused in the doorway, her expression tightening when she saw the state of the living room, the empty whiskey bottle, the stacks of documents, the billionaire sitting on the floor like a lost child. "Sir, are you all right?" she asked gently. Alexander swallowed hard, staring at the wall. "Just clean around me, Elaine." She didn't move. She simply looked at him, really looked at him, with an expression he hadn't seen in years. Pity. Not the empty, performative pity of reporters or businessmen. Real, human pity. "I brought you some tea," she said quietly, placing a warm cup near him. "Thank you," he muttered. As she turned to continue her work, Alexander heard her speaking softly into her phone. "Yes, Nova. I know. I'm worried too. He's just sitting there, baby, alone. Yes, I'll be careful." Nova. He had heard the name before but had never met her. Elaine's daughter, the one studying computer systems at a community college. Alexander barely registered the thought. But fate was already moving. At 7:03 p.m., after a day spent hiding from calls and headlines, Alexander heard footsteps behind him. When he turned, a young woman stood in the doorway. Elaine's daughter. Nova Carter. About 20, dressed in jeans and a sweater, curls pulled back, a laptop bag slung over her shoulder. But it wasn't her appearance that held Alexander's attention. It was her eyes. Sharp. Observant. Calm in a room filled with a billionaire's broken pride. "My mom asked me to check on you," she said simply. Alexander gave a humorless laugh. "Does everyone think I'm falling apart?" She didn't flinch. "You look like someone who hasn't slept in 36 hours. He blinked. He had been awake that long. Nova set her bag down and nodded toward his dead laptop. "Is that the system that crashed?" she asked. He exhaled heavily. What's left of it? There was a pause. Then Nova spoke 4 words that irritated him far more than they should have. Maybe I can help. Alexander scoffed. A billionaire's empire had been destroyed by a sophisticated cyber attack, and this college kid wanted to take a look. You. No offense, but my team of experts couldn't salvage anything. Nova didn't react to his tone. She simply stepped closer, unbothered. I'm not your experts, she said calmly. And it can't hurt to try. Her confidence disarmed him. Or maybe it was the simple truth that he had nothing left to lose. With a tired sigh, he gestured to the laptop. Fine. Knock yourself out. Nova sat cross-legged on the floor and opened her laptop. Within minutes, she was navigating his corrupted systems with a level of speed and intuition that Alexander had never seen, not even among his highest-paid specialists. At 1:12 a.m., Nova's voice broke the silence. Mr. Rhys, someone didn't just hack your system. Alexander looked up sharply. This breach wasn't done from the outside, she said, turning her screen to him. It was engineered from within Rhys Global. Alexander's breath caught. Nova continued, whoever sabotaged you, they knew everything. Your passwords, your backups, your launch timeline. Her eyes locked onto his. Someone close to you destroyed your empire. And in that moment, Alexander Rhys, fallen titan, realized the girl he once overlooked might be the only person in the world who could save him. By morning, Alexander Rhys had abandoned the luxury of denial. He sat beside Nova Carter on the floor of his once pristine penthouse, now littered with a storm of papers, empty coffee cups, and the shattered remains of his old life. Nova's laptop glowed between them like the only surviving flame in a burned-down kingdom. Elaine stood near the kitchen, wringing her hands as she watched her daughter type with blistering speed. "Baby, are you sure you should be doing this?" she asked softly. "Mom," Nova murmured without looking up, "if someone did this to Mr. Rhys, and if they think he's going to roll over, then they don't know me." Alexander stared at the young woman, barely 20, confident, unshaken, working with the precision of someone twice her age and 10 times his fallen pride. "What are you looking for?" he finally asked. "Patterns," Nova said. "Every programmer leaves them. Think of it like handwriting. Even if you try to hide it, your style always shows." She tapped rapidly, pulling up lines of corrupted code. Alexander recognized the chaos, the same digital poison that had melted his empire overnight. But watching Nova navigate it, he realized she wasn't sifting through rubble. She was excavating. "Look here," Nova said, highlighting a set of repeating sequences. "These aren't random." Alexander leaned closer. "Explain it to me like I'm not a tech analyst." Nova smirked. "Okay. Imagine someone breaks into your house and rearranges all your furniture. That sounds familiar. But," she continued, "they accidentally leave their fingerprints on the lamp, the table, the doorknob. Same thing here. Whoever sabotaged you wrote the malware using specific coding habits, shortcuts, comments, variable names, that match a person's digital fingerprint. And you can trace that." "Not instantly," she admitted. "But I can build a profile. Piece by piece." Elaine stepped forward. "Nova, this is dangerous." "I know, Mom," Nova said gently, "but we can't let someone get away with this. Not when they ruined a man's life." Alexander flinched at that. He wasn't used to being the one who needed saving. For hours more, Nova worked. The room filled with the clicking of keys, the hum of electronics, and the slow burn of revelation reaching its ignition point. Then Nova froze. Her eyes narrowed. Her breathing slowed. Her fingers hovered over the keyboard. "Mr. Rhys," she said quietly, "I think I found something." She zoomed in on a fragment of code. A tiny signature, almost invisible. A comment tag left behind, the kind programmers use to remind themselves of something. Only this one wasn't random. It was a habit. A style. A digital tick. Alexander stared. His chest tightened. The world tunneled. "No," he whispered. He recognized it. Nova spoke the truth he wasn't ready to confirm. This style, this structure, it matches logs created internally. Someone with access. Someone high level. Who? Elaine asked. Nova tapped a key. Another window appeared, overlaying login timestamps with the attack timeline. The dates aligned with perfect, horrifying clarity. Who logged in during these times? Nova asked. Alexander didn't need to check. He knew. The memory hit him like a physical blow. "This terminal," he said, pointing at the results, "belongs to Hugo Vance." Elaine blinked. "Who is that?" Alexander swallowed, jaw tightening. "My business partner. My friend of 15 years. And then, as if fate wanted to twist the knife further, Nova clicked another window. It displayed access attempts from Hugo's private office. Attempts disguised through proxies. Attempts that weren't fully erased. Nova looked up at him. "Mr. Rhys, he didn't just sabotage you. He prepared this for months." Alexander felt the burn of betrayal crawl through his veins. Hugo Vance, the man he had trusted more than anyone, had planted the code that annihilated his empire. Nova closed her laptop slowly. "It's not enough to win a case yet," she said. "But if we dig deeper, we'll find more." Alexander lifted his eyes to her. "You want to keep going?" Nova didn't hesitate. "You lost everything in one night, Mr. Rhys. I'm not letting the person who did that sleep peacefully." For the first time since his collapse, Alexander Rhys felt something return. Not pride. Not confidence. A spark. Hope. The sun had barely set when Alexander Rhys found himself standing in the narrow alley behind Rhys Global Systems, a place he had never once set foot in during his reign as CEO. He had always entered through the polished front lobby, greeted by marble floors and executives eager to impress. But now, stripped of power and access, he stood beside dumpsters, humidity, and a flickering service light. It felt fitting. This was where he belonged tonight, in the shadows. Nova Carter adjusted the strap of her laptop bag, her expression steady despite the tension threading through the air. She wore dark jeans, a hoodie, and determination sharper than a blade. Elaine Carter, her mother, looked far less calm. She clutched her old service key with trembling hands. "I can't believe I'm doing this. I could lose my job. You could get arrested. We shouldn't be here." "Mom," Nova whispered, placing a hand on her shoulder. "You know every hallway in that building better than any of us. We need you." Elaine swallowed hard. "I just clean offices, Nova. I'm not a criminal." "You're not doing anything wrong," Alexander said gently, surprising even himself with the softness in his voice. "You're helping uncover the truth. The real criminals are sitting in my old corner office right now." Elaine hesitated, then nodded, slipping the key into the lock. The door clicked open. The three of them stepped inside. The service corridor smelled faintly of disinfectant and steel. Elaine led the way with the confidence of someone who had spent years unnoticed in these back rooms, the invisible workforce that kept the building spotless while executives like Alexander barely acknowledged their existence. Alexander followed quietly, humbled by how blind he had been. Nova moved silently, scanning corners, listening for footsteps. She seemed to breathe in the building's digital heartbeat even from here. They reached a stairwell. "Elevators have cameras," Elaine whispered. "This way." She guided them up flights of stairs until they reached the 6th floor, the location of the dormant secondary server room. Alexander had forgotten it even existed. Elaine didn't forget anything. "This way," she murmured, leading them through the narrow halls. "Security doesn't patrol this area often." At the server room door, Nova knelt and connected a small device to the override panel. Alexander raised an eyebrow. "Where did you learn to do that?" Nova smirked faintly. "Internet." The lock clicked. The door swung open. Cold air washed over them, the hum of machines vibrating through the floor. Racks of servers lined the room like rows of silent soldiers. Nova immediately got to work. She connected her laptop to a maintenance terminal, fingers flying across keys with surgical precision. Alexander stood guard by the door while Elaine hovered near her daughter, half fearful, half proud. Minutes stretched into tense silence. Finally, Nova inhaled sharply. "I'm in." She pulled up a hidden directory, files that were never meant to be seen. Alexander recognized some of the project names. Internal prototypes. Trade secrets. Even early builds of Vanguard. Then she opened a folder labeled Aurora. "What is this?" Nova asked. Alexander's stomach twisted. "An internal codename Hugo and I once used for confidential testing." Nova clicked the files. A timeline appeared. Detailed logs. Commands executed. Data rerouted. All of them traced back to one terminal. Hugo Vance's private workstation. "Oh my God," Elaine whispered. Nova's eyes widened. He planned the entire crash. Every step. The malware wasn't sloppy, it was elegant. Precise. He knew exactly what he was doing. But then she froze. "Someone's accessing the system right now," she whispered. Alexander stiffened. "What?" Nova turned the laptop to show a blinking notification. "Live terminal login, user Vance." Hugo was online. Right now. Inside the same network they were poking through. "Close it," Alexander hissed. "Log out." "I can't," Nova said quickly. "If I disconnect abruptly, he'll know someone was here. I just need." Footsteps echoed outside the hallway. Heavy. Fast. Elaine's breath hitched. Alexander's pulse thundered. Nova unplugged instantly, slammed her laptop closed, and grabbed her bag. Elaine's voice trembled. "We need to go. Now." Alexander guided them through the emergency exit at the back of the server room, a narrow staircase that plunged downward. The footsteps above grew louder, closer. A voice shouted. "Security." They burst out of the stairwell into another service corridor and sprinted toward the alley. Nova's laptop bag bounced against her hip, Elaine clutched her daughter's arm, Alexander shielded them both as the door slammed shut behind them. Only when they reached Elaine's old sedan did they stop. Breathless. Shaking. Alive. Nova opened her laptop in the back seat. A slow, triumphant smile formed. "Mr. Rhys," she whispered, "we got it." Alexander stared at her, and felt something he thought he'd lost forever. A fighting chance. The next morning, Alexander Rhys sat at the small wooden dining table in Elaine's modest apartment, a world away from the marble counters and panoramic windows he once took for granted. The smell of pancakes drifted from the kitchen, mingling strangely with the tension that hung in the room like smoke. Nova sat across from him, her laptop open, eyes locked on the screen as she decrypted the files they had stolen from the secret Aurora directory. Elaine watched them both anxiously. "Nova," Elaine whispered, "tell me this was worth it." Nova didn't look up. "Mom, this is bigger than any of us." Alexander leaned forward. "Show me what you found." Nova turned the laptop toward him. A web of documents filled the screen: contracts, email threads, financial transfers, coded messages. But one file stood out, a detailed timeline of events, from 6 months ago until the night of the breach. It was labeled Phase Red. Nova opened it. Alexander scanned the entries, each line hitting him like a blow. Initial sabotage planning begins. Diversion through external breach simulation. Embed backdoor inside Vanguard core. Transfer prototype data to Vanstech servers. Eliminate Rhys from board. Absorb remaining assets post-collapse. Elaine gasped. He wanted everything. Nova nodded. He didn't just want to destroy you, Mr. Rhys. He wanted to replace you. Alexander clenched his fists. Hugo Vance, the man he had mentored, protected, trusted, had mapped out his downfall like a military operation. Nova clicked another tab. Emails appeared. Not just from Hugo, but from 2 other board members. Coordination. Strategy. Payment trails routed through offshore accounts. Elaine whispered, horrified, they were all in it together. "No," Nova said. "Not all. Just enough to overthrow him." Alexander felt his heart sink. "So the board, the people I thought were my allies. They were never on your side," Nova said. "They were on Hugo's payroll." There was more. Nova opened a video file. It showed Hugo Vance in a dim office, speaking to someone off camera. His voice was unmistakable. "Once Vanguard collapses, Rhys is finished. The board will push him out, and I'll acquire the remaining shares. Every innovation he ever made will belong to us." Alexander felt sick, heat rising in his chest. Hugo laughed in the video, a cold, confident sound. "He'll never see it coming." Nova paused the video. The room fell silent. Finally, Alexander rubbed his hands over his face. This is enough to bury him. To bury them all." But Nova shook her head. "It's not enough for court yet. They'll claim the video is doctored. The documents could be dismissed as planted. We need one more thing." Alexander frowned. "What's missing?" Nova tapped the screen. "The master key. The original code used to trigger Vanguard's collapse. If we can find the final string, the one Hugo executed remotely, it will prove he authored the attack." "And where is this key?" Elaine asked. Nova took a deep breath. "On Hugo's main workstation. The one on the executive floor." Alexander exhaled sharply. "The floor with the heaviest security." "Exactly," Nova said. "The safe inside his office. Everything points to it." Elaine's eyes widened. "No. Absolutely not." You're not going back in there. Mom. No. Elaine snapped, voice breaking. Last night was already too close. They almost caught you. Alexander spoke softly. Elaine, they won't stop until they erase everything. Deep down you know Hugo will wipe those servers within hours. If we don't act, he wins. Elaine turned away, tears threatening. Nova stood, placing a hand on her mother's shoulder. I'll be careful. I promise. Then she turned to Alexander. Tonight, we go back. Alexander nodded. He felt something fierce awaken inside him, something that had been dormant since the night his empire fell. Resolve. Hugo Vance had taken everything from him. But now Alexander had something Hugo didn't. A brilliant young woman who refused to back down. Nova Carter wasn't just helping him uncover the truth. She was about to change the course of everything. The courthouse steps looked different when you were the one being judged by the world. Alexander Rhys stood at the bottom of those stone stairs, surrounded by reporters, flashing cameras, and a sea of microphones thrust toward him like weapons. The once admired billionaire was now branded a failure, a cautionary tale, a corporate disgrace. Every headline for the past week had painted him as incompetent, reckless, or corrupt. But today, for the first time since his world collapsed, he wasn't here to defend himself. He was here to expose the people who destroyed him. Nova Carter walked beside him, clutching her laptop to her chest like a soldier carrying the most important weapon on the battlefield. Elaine hovered protectively near her daughter, nervous but steady. A small team of lawyers flanked Alexander, but none of them mattered as much as the 20-year-old girl from a humble apartment in the city, the girl who had rewritten fate with her brilliance. Inside courtroom 11, the atmosphere buzzed with tension. Investors, ex-employees, journalists, board members, all packed into wooden benches. Hugo Vance sat at the defendant's table, adjusting his perfect suit with the arrogance of a man who believed the world owed him victory. He smirked when he saw Alexander enter. That smirk only hardened Alexander's resolve. The judge entered. Proceedings began. Hugo's lawyer spoke first, smooth and confident. Your Honor, my client had no involvement in any breach. These accusations come from a desperate man trying to salvage his ruined legacy. Whispers rippled through the room. Then it was Alexander's turn. His lead attorney rose. Your Honor, the plaintiff will demonstrate a coordinated conspiracy led by Hugo Vance, designed to dismantle Rhys Global Systems from the inside. But the true moment everyone waited for came when the attorney announced, we call our key witness, Nova Carter. A few people in the courtroom actually laughed. A maid's daughter? Against Hugo Vance. Nova stepped forward anyway. Small. Quiet. Barely older than a freshman. But her presence hit the room like a silent storm. She took the stand. Right hand raised. Oath sworn. Then she opened her laptop, connected it to the courtroom display, and spoke in a steady voice that silenced even the skeptics. Your Honor, I will walk the court through the digital fingerprints that reveal the origin of the attack on Vanguard. Her fingers flew across the keys. The screens lit up with lines of code, timestamps, server logs. Nova explained each one with clarity and precision. This pattern, she said, circling a set of symbols, appears consistently in all versions of the malware. It matches the coding habits from one user, Hugo Vance, proven by his work on several Rhys Global prototypes. Hugo shifted uncomfortably. Next, Nova continued, these login timestamps coincide with nights when Mr. Vance stayed late at the office. They originate from his private terminal. A murmur swept the audience. Hugo's lawyer objected. This is circumstantial. Nova didn't even flinch. Then let's move to evidence that is not. She opened the Aurora directory log. The courtroom lights dimmed as the massive screen projected the video of Hugo Vance from months earlier, his voice unmistakable. Once Vanguard collapses, Rhys is finished. Gasps echoed around the room. Elaine covered her mouth. Alexander felt his pulse pounding in his temples. But Nova wasn't done. She pulled up the master key, the final code string they had retrieved during the break-in. This, Nova said, shining like a warrior in digital armor, is the trigger Hugo Vance executed. It is a unique string, one he has used for years in private builds. This is the proof that only he could have written the collapse command. Silence choked the courtroom. Hugo's face drained of color. His lawyer sputtered. This is fabricated. Nova turned to the judge. You may check the metadata. It matches perfectly with the server logs and timestamps. The judge nodded gravely. We will. For the first time, Hugo looked afraid. Alexander watched him with a mixture of grief and cold, righteous anger. Once a friend. Now the architect of his destruction. When Nova stepped down, the entire courtroom rose into whispers of awe. Alexander met her eyes. Thank you, he whispered. Nova smiled, small but confident. We're not done yet. The judge called for a recess. By the time they reconvened, the verdict was clear. There would be no easy escape for Hugo Vance. And Alexander Rhys, with a maid's daughter by his side, finally felt justice rising. The verdict against Hugo Vance spread across news channels like wildfire. For the first time since his downfall, Alexander Rhys stepped outside to see something he hadn't seen in months. Respectful silence. Soft nods from strangers. A sense that maybe, just maybe, the world now understood he wasn't the villain. But understanding didn't rebuild an empire. He still had nothing. No company. No assets. No boardroom. Just a tarnished name and a mountain of public sympathy right when sympathy was the last thing he needed. Nova Carter and her mother invited him back to their apartment after the trial. It felt strange watching the two women move around the small kitchen together, laughing, arguing softly, planning dinner. Their home was humble, warm, full of life, a stark contrast to his cold penthouse filled with nothing but echoes. Alexander sat at the table, staring at a cup of tea Elaine placed before him. You need to eat, she said, smiling gently. You've been fighting battles for days. Alexander exhaled. I don't even know what to do next. The company is lost. The board will never let me back in. Investors don't trust me anymore. Nova slid into the chair beside him, opening her laptop. Then don't try to get Rhys Global back. He stared at her. It's all I've ever built. And it nearly destroyed you, Nova replied calmly. Hugo didn't attack your empire because it was strong. He attacked it because it was vulnerable, controlled by the wrong people, tied to the wrong hands, dependent on people who never respected you. Alexander blinked. No one had ever said it so directly. Mr. Rhys, Nova continued, you don't need to rebuild that empire. You need to build something new. Elaine chimed in softly. Something clean. Something yours. Nova turned the laptop toward him. A blank digital canvas. A new beginning. I've been working on something, she said. An idea for a startup. Ethical tech. Transparent. Secure. No shareholders steering the ship. No opportunists waiting to steal anything. Alexander frowned. Nova, starting a company isn't easy. You're 20 years old. 20, she corrected with a nod, and already more qualified than the engineers who worked for Rhys Global. He couldn't argue with that. She had single-handedly uncovered the entire conspiracy. But then he hesitated. Nova, I can't pay you. I can't even afford a proper office. She smirked. Good thing our office is free. Elaine placed a hand on her daughter's shoulder. Our dining table is yours as long as you need it. Alexander laughed softly, a rare, almost foreign sound after months of silence. They spent the next week working like a small but fierce army. Nova outlined a prototype. A cybersecurity platform built with transparency and community trust at its core. Unlike Vanguard, this new project, named Lumina Shield, would be impossible to corrupt from the inside. Every line of code Nova wrote had layers of integrity checks, verification cycles, and accountability signatures that made Alexander marvel at her mind. He had spent years hiring top-tier engineers. None of them were like her. At night, Elaine cooked simple meals while Alexander and Nova brainstormed. Sometimes they argued, sometimes they laughed, sometimes they sat in tense silence when the code refused to cooperate. But every day, Lumina Shield grew stronger. And Alexander noticed something he hadn't expected. He was becoming human again. Not a billionaire. Not a CEO. Not a headline. A man with purpose. One night, after hours of coding, Nova looked at him and said, "You know, you don't have to do this for revenge." Alexander leaned back. "Then why am I doing it?" "Because you still have something to give the world," Nova replied. "Hugo tried to bury you. But he forgot one thing." "What's that?" Nova smiled. "Buried seeds don't die. They grow." Her words struck deep. Lumina Shield wasn't just a company. It was a rebirth. A chance to use his brilliance without corruption. A chance to build something with someone who actually believed in him. Alexander Rhys had lost everything. But sitting across from a maid's daughter with a fire in her eyes, he realized he was finally building something that mattered. 2 years later, the world spoke the name Lumina Shield with the same reverence it once reserved for Rhys Global. Only this time, the admiration wasn't for a billionaire giant, it was for a company born in a cramped apartment, built on truth, trust, and two people who refused to stay broken. The new headquarters wasn't extravagant. It was a renovated brick warehouse with glass-paneled rooms, open workspaces, and a rooftop garden where employees gathered to breathe, talk, or create. No marble floors. No ego-driven offices. No golden elevators. Alexander Rhys walked through the building every morning with rolled-up sleeves and a smile that employees actually greeted, not feared. He paused beside engineers, asked questions, offered ideas, and listened. Really listened. None of this would have existed without her. Nova Carter. At 22, she was already the lead architect behind Lumina Shield's groundbreaking technology. A prodigy who had turned the cybersecurity landscape on its head. Articles called her one of the brightest minds of her generation. Investors begged for meetings. Universities offered honorary degrees. She turned most of it down. Nova never cared about fame. She cared about the work, and about making sure people who were once voiceless finally had something built for them, not to exploit them. Alexander watched her now from across the open floor. She sat at her station, surrounded by whiteboards full of sketches, diagrams, and equations only she truly understood. A few young interns leaned over her shoulder as she explained a new verification sequence, her voice calm and patient. Elaine entered with a tray of snacks she insisted the team take breaks to enjoy. Employees rushed over, greeting her warmly, no longer a maid, but the unofficial office mother of Lumina Shield. It struck Alexander often how the two women who saved him now stood at the center of a company transforming the world. That afternoon, Alexander gathered the team for a meeting in the main hall. Sunlight streamed through the warehouse windows, casting long golden beams over the polished floors. "We're ready," Nova said, clicking to the final slide on the large screen. Lumina Shield 4.0. The newest update. The safest system ever built. A global launch scheduled for tomorrow. Alexander exhaled. "This is the one." Nova leaned back in her chair. "The world needs it. More than we imagined." Elaine clasped her hands proudly. "Look at you both." The room fell into a quiet, reverent awe. But Alexander wasn't thinking about the company right then. He was thinking about the night he nearly lost everything, standing in the ruins of his penthouse, believing his life had ended. And then a girl walked in. A girl who wasn't supposed to matter in the eyes of powerful men. A girl the world might have overlooked. A girl who changed everything in seconds. Later that evening, Nova and Alexander stood on the rooftop garden, the city lights shimmering below. A soft breeze carried the scent of blooming jasmine from the planters Elaine insisted they add. "You ever think about how strange it all is?" Nova asked, leaning on the railing. "How so?" Alexander replied. She shrugged. "You were a billionaire. I was just me. And now look where we are." Alexander smiled, a soft, humbled smile. "You were never just you. I think the world knows that now." Nova looked down, embarrassed by praise but warmed by it. "I just didn't want to see someone good get destroyed. And I never expected someone like you to rebuild me," Alexander said. "Or to teach me what real strength looks like." They stood quietly for a moment, watching the city breathe below. Nova broke the silence. "So what now?" "Now," Alexander said, "we make sure Lumina Shield protects people who can't protect themselves. The ones big tech forgets. The ones powerful men try to break." Nova nodded slowly. "A legacy?" Alexander looked at her, the girl who had dragged him out of ruin with a laptop and a fearless heart. "No," he said softly. "A beginning." Elaine called them down for dinner, her voice echoing across the roof. Nova laughed and headed toward the stairs. Alexander followed, pausing once to glance back at the city. Once, he ruled it alone. Cold. Distant. Proud. Now, he walked into a warm room filled with light, hope, and the people who saved him, not because they had to, but because they believed in something he never saw in himself. Alexander Rhys had lost everything. But his legacy, reborn through the brilliance of a maid's daughter, was only just beginning.